There is something special about whiskey. It's not just a drink to be savored. It often serves as a gateway to places, traditions and stories that span for centuries. And when it comes to whiskey, one of the first countries that comes to mind is Scotland. Many associate it with now familiar images: bagpipes, kills, castles, shrouded in mist, and windswept landscapes. All of this is obviously part of its identity. But Scotland also lives all in words, music, poetry, and stories passed down from generation to generation. And if there's one figure who, more than any other, has left a deep mark on the Scottish collective memory, that figure is Robert Burns, poet, songwriter, and observer of everyday life, and whiskey lover, of course. With this video, I intend to pay a small tribute to the Bard of Scotland and his cultural legacy. Robert Burns, also known as Robbie Burns, was born in 1759 in Alloway, in southern Scotland. His family did not belong to the cultural elite of the time. His father was a farmer, and daily life consisted of physical labor and sacrifice. Burns spent much of his youth working in the fields. This is significant because it profoundly influenced his writings. In his writings, we don't find only lofty or abstract themes. We find real life. We find ordinary people, genuine feelings, relationships, desires and hardships. From a young age, he showed a great aptitude for reading and writing. He studied as much as he could, often thanks to the effort of his family who, despite the difficulties, strongly believed in education. As the years went by, he began writing poems that circulated more and more widely, until the publication of his first collection, poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect. That moment changed everything. The young Scottish farmer began to be recognized throughout the country. One of the most interesting aspects of Burns concerns the language he chose to use. At the time when many writers were trying to conform to the most prestigious literary models, Burns devoted much of his work to Scots, the traditional Scottish language. This choice was no accident. Through that language, he was able to portray his people in a direct and relatable way. He spoke of love, nature, politics, dignity, freedom, and human relationships. Many Scots immediately recognized themselves in his words, and perhaps this is precisely one of the reasons why even today Burns is perceived as more than just a poet. For many, he has become part of the national identity. Even those who don't know the name Robert Burns are very likely familiar with at least one of his works. The most famous is undoubtedly Auld Lang Syne. Every year on New Year's Eve, millions of people around the world sing it, perhaps without knowing where it really comes from. The lyrics speak of time passing, shared memories, and the friends who are part of our journey. And it is surprising to think that words written more than 2 centuries ago still continue to unite people from completely different cultures today. But this is only a part of his output. Burns wrote hundreds of poems and songs. Among the most famous are works such as To a Mouse, A Fond Kiss, Tam O'Shanter, A Red Red Rose. Each one tells a different story of human life. Burns' cultural legacy in Scotland is so strong that every year on January 25, his birthday, it is celebrated with a very special tradition, the Burns Supper. It is a commemorative dinner held in Scotland, but also in many other parts of the world. The program often follows a very specific ritual. People gather around a table. Traditional dishes such as haggis are served, poems are read, toasts are made, and music is played. At more formal suppers, however, the arrival of guests is often announced by a bagpiper. And of course, there is no shortage of whiskey. More than just a dinner, the Burns supper is a ritual that keeps a collective memory alive. If there is one element which runs the Scottish imagination, it is undoubtedly whiskey. And in the case of Robert Burns, this connection appears surprisingly natural. For Burns, whiskey was part of everyday life. It was present during gatherings, in conversations among friends, and on evenings spent with poetry, stories, and music. To truly understand this relationship, one must remember an important fact. In 18th century Scotland, whiskey did not occupy the role we often attribute to it today. It was not yet perceived primarily as a collector's item or a product for technical tasting, with aromatic descriptors or limited editions. Rather, it was a complete presence in people's life. It was drunk in homes, taverns, during celebrations, and even for medicinal purposes. And Burns lived that world to the fullest. Whiskey appears repeatedly in his works. One of the most famous examples is Scotch Drink. In this poem, Burns openly celebrates the national spirit, transforming it almost into a symbol of Scottish character. A strong sense of belonging emerges from the verses. But so does the spontaneity that characterizes much of his writing. Another particularly interesting text is John Barleycorn. Here Burns tells in allegorical form the story of barley, transforming it into a legendary figure. The harvest, the processing, the transformation of the cereal. Everything becomes part of a narrative that, at its core, also speaks to the origins of alcoholic beverages and their role in society. But then there is Tam O'Shanter, probably one of Burns' most beloved narrative works. The protagonist, Tam, after spending a night in the tavern with laughter, toast and revelry, mounts his horse Meg to return home. On the way, passing by the old kirk of Alloway, he notices something unusual. Lights, music, and an atmosphere that seems to belong to another world. As he approaches, he finds himself facing a surreal scene, dancing witches, eerie figures, and the sound of a bagpipe, played by Old Nick, the devil himself. And it is precisely at this moment that Burns writes, inspiring bold John Barleycorn. What dangers too canst make us scorn? Why tipany we fear na evil? With whiskey, we'll face the devil. Here Burns plays with an extraordinary image. After a few drinks, even the devil seems less threatening. And it is precisely here that one of the most fascinating aspects of his relationship with whiskey emerges. Not just the pleasure of drinking, but everything that arises around it. Friendship, stories told late into the night, courage, imagination, elements that even today continue to make many whiskey enthusiasts feel a close connection to the figure of Robert Burns. Even today, the world of whiskey continues to pay tribute to Robert Burns at the island of Arran, at the Loch Ranza distillery. A special edition dedicated to the Bard of Scotland has been created, the Arran Robert Burns Single Malt Scotch Whisky. A smooth, elegant and approachable single malt with sweet and fruity notes that seem almost to echo the character of a poem. And perhaps this is no coincidence, because after all, some whiskies do more than simply tell the story of a region. They also tell the story of the people who made it immortal. Robert Burns is one of those figures who continue to live on long after their time. His words are still present in music, traditions, and in the memory of his people. And for those who love whiskey, knowing Burns means understanding even better the cultural context from which the spirit originates. Because sometimes, behind a glass of whiskey, we find not just aromas and flavors, we find stories. And some of these stories bear the name of Robert Burns.